Hey everyone, it's Charles. How are you today? And why is Ash Ketchum called Ash Ketchum? When it comes to the English dub versus the Japanese original script for the Pokemon anime, there are countless differences, ranging from differences that are fairly minor to very clever to pretty funny to outright misleading. And we actually did a video last year that dug into the nefarious Pidgeot promise from the English dub, so you should check that video out after if you are interested. Anyways, I have decided to turn the topic of localization differences into a series in which we will be breaking down the Japanese versus English script differences. In the Pokemon 2000, the world will turn to Ash prophecy, Brock's famous "I'll use my frying pan as a drying pan" line, the Team Rocket motto, etc. So if you have something you want me to take a look at, then please drop a comment with the episode number and if possible a timestamp or clear description of the situation in which the line gets dropped so that I can actually find it. As a speaker of English and Japanese who has consumed the show entirely in Japanese for over a decade now, I simply love this kind of topic. And along the way in this series, we will be unearthing plenty of fascinating facts about the master copy of the Pokemon anime, Japanese, and how difficult it is to translate certain things across languages that are very, very different in terms of their structure, content, and the cultures from which they have emerged. This particular video will be somewhat of a warm-up focused on the theories behind the localization of Ash's name rather than any specific lines of dialogue, but be sure to subscribe for those meaty chats that are just down the pipeline. And with that said, as always, it is going to be a fun time, so kindly ground pound that like button for the YouTube algorithm, and let's jump right in. As you may know, while the Pokemon anime's hero is known as Ash Ketchum in English, his name in the original Japanese script is simply Satoshi, and no surname is ever mentioned. But why? Firstly, the name Satoshi is a reference to the creator of the Pokemon video games, Satoshi Tajiri, whose name Satoshi is a reading drawn from the kanji character Chi, which means wisdom, intellect, or reason, and yes, the irony is thick. Anyways, the letters of Ash's first name in English are clearly pulled from Satoshi, and his tacked-on last name Ketchum appears to be drawn from the "Gotta Catch 'em all" slogan that was particularly prevalent in the early years. However, there may be two more layers of meaning behind the name that we will discuss momentarily. I don't really think it matters that he was given a last name unfaithful to the original show, but one implication of adding surnames to characters who do not have surnames in the original canon is that it can create interesting questions related to the narrative. For instance, implying that certain characters are married when they may not necessarily be, or may have gotten divorced, and leaving us wondering why almost nobody outside of Ash Ketchum, Tracy Sketchit, and a handful of others are noted as having last names. One other example is Gary Oak. Similar to Ash Ketchum, Gary's Japanese name is simply Shigeru, which is a reference to Nintendo's all-star creator Shigeru Miyamoto, who Satoshi Tajiri has always viewed as an uncatchable rival. Accordingly, Gary appears to have been drawn from the Geru in Shigeru. And as you'd expect, Satoshi and Shigeru are among the default character names listed in the Japanese versions of the Generation 1 Pokemon games, as are their equivalents Ash and Gary in the localized English language games. P.S. Gary kinda sounds like diarrhea in Japanese. As for the Oak in Gary Oak, not only does it create a sort of duality with Ash in the English dub if we consider that their names conjure up the images of Ash and Gary Oak trees, but moreover, the name Oak establishes a clear link to his grandfather, Professor Oak, in the English dub, a character who is actually referred to as Okido Yukinari Hakase in the original script, with Okido actually being a legitimate Japanese family name that literally means large wooden gate. But let's stop going down these rabbit holes for now. The point is, why did first name only characters like Satoshi or Shigeru end up receiving the surnames Ketchum and Oak in the first place? The wordplay we've discussed is quite interesting, but could there be another more practical reason? The answer is yes, perhaps. Another theory I've seen floating around is that the addition of Ash's surname to the English dub may have come from the desire to loosely match the mouth movements of characters saying Satoshi in the anime to the sounds of his name being spoken in English. After all, if you very, very clearly enunciate the word Satoshi and the word Ash pops out, it is about as jarring as a 1980s Jackie Chan dub. And by this logic, if you were to align a 3-syllable name like Satoshi to Ash Ketchum or Shigeru to Gary Oak, the result is a pairing of mouth movements and sounds that doesn't look particularly ridiculous. Certainly, the need to match dubs to mouth flaps does have a strong influence on the way that lines are structured when translating scripts from Japanese into English, so this is a good explanation on paper at the very least. Except that regarding these names, the characters are not sluggishly mouthing them like malfunctioning slowbots. The mouth flaps for these names are pretty fast and loose to begin with, and Ash can already fit the mouth flap for Satoshi well enough, especially with the rest of each line giving you options to work with. Of course, I'm not an expert or even a Nugget Bridge lackey when it comes to the science of mouth flaps, and it is something that people dubbing the anime pay very careful attention to, so this certainly may have been a consideration. That said, I am more inclined to believe that the wordplay was a bigger reason behind the addition of Ash's name in the English dub than the mouth flaps, and on that note, here is one final twist to consider. As we've discussed, the last name Ketchum is typically considered a reference to the Gotta Catch 'em all catchphrase, and there is the argument that the mouth flaps may have had something to do with it, but there may actually be another interesting piece to the puzzle. Thomas Edward Ketchum. Tom Ketchum was an American cowboy and outlaw who was executed in 1901 over an attempted train robbery, and one Reddit poster has proposed an intriguing theory about how Tom Ketchum's legacy may live on in Ash's surname. Quite simply, there are three main human characters in the Pokemon anime: Ash, Jesse, and James. And it is no secret that Jesse and James's names were adapted from Jesse James, an American outlaw and train robber who has become somewhat of a pop culture icon over the years. As such, it would be quite fitting to link Ash to his co-stars with a reference of the same cut. And thus, the name Ketchum could be a double entendre that pulls Gotta Catch 'em all and Tom Ketchum together into one name. Adding fuel to the fire, he even refers to himself as Tom Ato when trying to conceal his identity in episode 42, Showdown at Dark City. Tom Ato, Ash Ketchum, Tom Ketchum. I don't know, but it is a fun theory. But how about you? From meaning to mouth flaps to cowboys, we've put the theories and the reasoning behind Ash Ketchum's name out there on the table, so which do you buy into and which are baloney? And what Japanese to English localization difference should I take a look at next? I'm curious what you think, and before we wrap things up, for those who are looking to brush up their art, learn Japanese, or master some other skill altogether, here's an offer from today's sponsor, Skillshare, which I have been using myself for nearly 2 years now, because I like it. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of inspiring classes for creators that is dedicated to helping you improve your skills while deepening existing passions and getting lost in creativity. And better yet, the first 1,000 people to use the link below will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare to get a taste of quality teaching on topics that actually interest you, like how to draw and animate pixel art. I first started using Skillshare back in 2020 to beef up my storytelling skills, and for anyone getting into writing fantasy stories or building out compelling game worlds, I recommend science fiction and fantasy creating unique and powerful worlds by Lincoln Michelle, whose insights on world building and reinventing classic tropes have helped me tighten up my own fantasy world in ways I wouldn't have otherwise thought to. Of course, there are thousands of other classes to level up with on Skillshare, and the value for money is very much worthy of the chef's kiss. So be sure to click the link in the description to claim your free trial of Skillshare Premium. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. And with that said, have yourself a good one, and I will see you in the next video.